Gabriel had always been a man of simple, predictable routine. He worked at a construction company as an engineer and, in his personal life, cultivated what he considered most valuable: love for his wife, Laura. They met at college, and their complicity blossomed over the years. Together, they faced many challenges, but always with the certainty that they had each other. Laura was the brightest part of Gabriel's life, someone who brought lightness and joy to the most difficult days. However, one summer afternoon changed everything. When the waters of a river they were visiting on a peaceful trip turned into an irreversible nightmare. The accident happened suddenly. Laura, always a nature lover, had suggested a walk along the banks of a river known for its beautiful landscapes. It was a place they had visited since the beginning of their relationship, a refuge that connected them with the tranquility of nature. But that day, the currents were stronger than usual, and Gabriel, who was concerned about safety, hesitated. Laura, smiling, tried to reassure him, saying there was nothing to worry about. However, as she entered the water, an unexpected wave pulled her away from the shore, taking her to the bottom of a whirlpool. Gabriel, desperate, tried to reach her, but the waters were treacherous, and Laura disappeared before his eyes in a matter of seconds. The rescue was late, and the efforts of the teams looking for Laura lasted days. Gabriel remained at the river's edge, refusing to leave, as if his presence there could somehow change what had happened. But, at the end of a painful week, Laura's body was found, inert, kilometers from the place where she had been swept away by the current. The image of her face, serene and distant, was the last memory Gabriel had of his wife, a memory that would haunt him for years to come, leaving an indelible mark on his soul. From that day on, the river, which once symbolized peace and harmony, became a symbol of irreparable loss and pain. Gabriel's life fell apart after the accident. He put aside all the plans he had made with Laura and closed in on himself. Friends tried to cheer him up, but he rejected any attempt at comfort. For Gabriel, nothing could fill the void left by Laura, and grief became his most faithful companion. The nights were particularly difficult. He used to wake up at dawn, taken by dreams in which Laura called him from the waters, as if her voice still echoed through the currents. These nightmares made every dawn a challenge, and the sunlight that invaded his room seemed to mock the darkness into which his life had plunged. Years passed, but Gabriel's pain didn't lessen. It just turned into a constant burden. He continued to live in a house full of memories of Laura. Every corner, every object, held a memory of the time they spent together. Gabriel kept everything as if Laura would return at any moment. The vase with her favorite flowers, which he replaced weekly, the photographs spread across the walls, and even the mug with her name on it that he never used again. Everything was there, like a sanctuary that he would not allow to be changed. Gabriel's life became a repetitive cycle of work and isolation, where the only time he seemed to connect with the outside world was when he visited Laura's grave on Sunday afternoons. At work, Gabriel was known for his efficiency and focus, but also for his coldness. Office colleagues rarely saw him smile or engage in conversations that weren't strictly professional. The only exception was Livia, a colleague who, since he returned to work after the accident, had shown constant kindness. She always brought Gabriel extra coffee on difficult mornings, left notes with motivating phrases on his desk, and insisted on inviting him to small social events. Gabriel, although grateful, did not allow himself to form strong bonds with her or anyone else. He felt that making room for new bonds would be a betrayal of Laura's memory. Livia, however, did not give up. She saw in Gabriel something more than a closed and distant man. I noticed a sparkle in his eyes that sometimes appeared in brief moments of distraction, as if he still had something to offer the world. Livia tried to respect Gabriel's space, but she couldn't help but feel a growing concern when she saw him losing himself in his own pain. She herself had faced difficult losses in the past and knew that the pain of grief could be devastating. But she also believed that, with time and the right help, the wounds could begin to heal. Still, Gabriel remained closed off, and Livia limited herself to small gestures, hoping that, one day, he would be able to trust her. One afternoon, while they were reviewing a report together, Livia noticed that Gabriel had a blue handkerchief in his inside pocket. Curious, she asked if it was a special gift, but Gabriel just smiled sadly and diverted the subject. Livia felt that there was something profound behind that gesture and decided not to insist, but the image of the scarf remained in her mind. For Gabriel, that piece of blue fabric was more than just a scarf. It was the last physical memory of Laura, something he kept with him every day, as if it could somehow keep her close to him. The scarf, a gift she had given him for his birthday, was a link he wasn't ready to break. Gabriel didn't know it, but that afternoon would be a turning point. Livia was beginning to understand that there was something more to the pain he carried, something she couldn't ignore. At the same time, Gabriel felt more vulnerable than ever, as if memories of Laura were intensifying in ways he couldn't control. The weight of the handkerchief in his pocket, Livia's constant presence in his life, and the echoes of the dreams that disturbed him every night mixed together, creating an uneasiness that Gabriel still didn't know how to deal with. And so, without realizing it, he was on the verge of a change that would transform his life in ways he never imagined possible. The days passed slowly, as if Gabriel's life was trapped in an endless melancholy. But one winter morning, while organizing old papers and documents at home, Gabriel came across something he hadn't seen in years. A small notebook, where Laura used to write her reflections, ideas, and dreams. The notebook was stored in a box at the back of the closet, mixed with memories of happy times. Gabriel hesitated before opening it, feeling a tightness in his chest as he touched that object that carried so much of his wife's presence. When she opened the pages, she found excerpts that spoke of moments lived by both of them and the plans she had for the future, many of which she never had the chance to realize. As he leafed through his notebook, a specific page caught his attention. It was a text written by Laura months before the accident, in which she spoke about her desire to regain connection with the world around her, to start over in a simpler and fuller way. Sometimes I feel like we need to lose ourselves to find ourselves again. It is in the currents of life that we discover what really matters, she wrote in neat handwriting, accompanied by a drawing of a river meandering between mountains. Gabriel felt a mixture of sadness and tenderness when he read that, as if Laura was trying to send him a message, even after so long. Her words echoed in his mind throughout that day, leaving a trail of uneasiness. That night, Gabriel couldn't sleep. Laura's words seemed to speak directly to him, questioning him about the time he had spent immersed in pain, away from everything he loved. He wondered if, somewhere, Laura wanted him to live again, to find a way to overcome the loss. The image of the river, which was once a symbol of sadness, began to look different, as if it represented a current that called him to move forward. Gabriel, who had always avoided thinking about what life would be like without Laura, felt overcome by an urgent need to change something, to make peace with the past and to discover if there was a way to continue. It was in this whirlwind of emotions that Gabriel began to pay more attention to Livia. He couldn't explain exactly why, but something about her presence made him feel less alone. Maybe it was the fact that she didn't try to force him to talk about his feelings, but at the same time, she never stopped being there, offering silent gestures of support. Livia, in turn, noticed that Gabriel was different, more thoughtful, and, in a way, more open to the life around him. She wasn't sure what had caused this change, but she hoped it was a sign that he was beginning to reconnect with the world. A few days later, during a break at work, Gabriel saw Livia looking through the break room window, observing the rain falling outside. Without thinking much, he approached and started a conversation. They talked about the weather, the changes at the office, and, unexpectedly, places they would both like to visit one day. Livia mentioned that she would love to visit a small mountain village where, according to her, there was a river that crossed the city, famous for its beauty and for being a place where people went to reconnect with themselves. Gabriel felt a chill run down his spine when he heard the word river. It was as if life was trying to tell him something, using Laura's words and everyday coincidences to guide him. While they were talking, Gabriel watched Livia with a different look. He noticed the softness in her gestures, the way she seemed to always be present, without invading other people's space. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to have someone like her closer to his life, someone who understood his pain without trying to erase it, but who could also show him that life still held possibilities. Still, Gabriel felt torn between the desire to move on and the guilt of thinking about leaving his grief behind. Laura's memory was a part of who he was, and the idea that he might find a new reason to live seemed almost a betrayal of his memory. As the weeks went by, Gabriel continued to reflect on the conversation he had with Livia. He couldn't help but feel that there was something special about the mention of the village and the river. On a particularly lonely afternoon, he decided to research the place that Livia had mentioned. He discovered that it was a village known for its peaceful atmosphere, where people went to meditate, to escape the pressures of modern life and to find a kind of inner peace. The more he read about the place, the more he felt there was something there that could help him deal with the ghosts of his past. The idea of visiting that river began to grow in his mind, as if it were some kind of last tribute to Laura and what she meant to him. Being close to Livia, even though he was still shy, brought Gabriel an unexpected realization. He was tired of holding on to the past, but he didn't know how to move forward without feeling guilty. During a longer conversation at the end of a working day, Livia mentioned that she was going to the village at the weekend to visit some friends, and, without thinking much, Gabriel asked if he could accompany her. The proposal took them both by surprise. Livia, who always believed that Gabriel needed time to process his emotions, hesitated for a moment, but soon accepted, smiling warmly. "Of course, it will be good for you. And who knows, you might find something there that you've been looking for a long time," she replied. Gabriel's decision to accompany Livia to the village was made without him fully understanding what he was looking for there. He didn't know if it was a way to honor Laura's memory, if it was an impulse to get closer to someone who seemed to truly care about him, or if he just wanted to understand why her words and his wife's memories were so intertwined. In your mind. But he was sure of one thing. For the first time in many years, he felt like he was about to do something that could change the course of his life. And with that thought, he decided to prepare for the trip, eager for what he would find in the waters of that new river. On the morning of the trip, Gabriel woke up with a mix of anxiety and expectation, feelings he hadn't experienced in a long time. She dressed simply, took a small backpack and put Laura's notebook and the blue scarf she always carried with her in it. He didn't know exactly why he was carrying these objects, but he felt like he needed to have them by his side, as if they were a bridge between the past and what he was about to discover. When he met Livia at the meeting point, he noticed that she was also a little nervous, but she tried to hide it with her usual encouraging smile. "Ready for an adventure?" she asked, trying to ease the tension. Gabriel smiled back, a shy but sincere smile. During the car ride, they talked about different topics, trying to avoid the anxiety of what awaited them in the village. Gabriel felt like he was moving away from something dark and that, for the first time in years, there was a promise of light on the horizon. Livia noticed his change in attitude, as he was more willing to talk about light topics, and took the opportunity to share funny stories from his childhood in a country town. Gabriel laughed, surprising himself with the feeling of lightness he hadn't felt in a long time. The road, which wound through mountains covered in green, seemed to be a reflection of Gabriel's own path, full of curves, but leading to an unknown and promising destination. When they finally arrived at the village, Gabriel was impressed by the atmosphere of the place. The houses were simple, made of wood and stone, and the sound of a stream ran gently through the trees, creating a melody that seemed to calm his mind. The air was fresh and clean, and a gentle mist covered the surrounding mountains, giving the place an almost magical appearance. Livia guided him to the small inn where they would be staying, and when they settled in, she suggested that they take a walk around the village before going to the river. Gabriel agreed, feeling a curiosity he hadn't felt in a long time. The walk through the village streets was an invigorating experience for Gabriel. He observed the local people, who smiled welcomingly, and felt a human warmth that seemed to be missing in the big city. Livia, always kind, greeted the residents and introduced Gabriel as a friend who had come to see the place. As they walked, she pointed to a small cafe near the central square and suggested they stop there to rest. Sitting at a rustic wooden table, overlooking the square, they talked about Gabriel's first impressions of the place. "It's strange, but I feel as if this place is already part of me," he confessed, observing the peaceful movement of people around. After a few hours exploring the village, Livia finally suggested that they go to the river that had so inspired Gabriel to make the trip. It's a little far away, but it's worth it. They say that the waters have something special, something that makes people reflect on life, she explained, as they started walking towards the trail that led to the river. Gabriel, holding Laura's notebook in his pocket, felt that this moment could be decisive. He didn't know if he would find answers to his questions, but something in his intuition told him he needed to be there, next to Livia, to find out. The path to the river was lined with tall trees and an almost reverent silence. As they walked, Livia talked about the times she visited that place, but Gabriel was absorbed in his own thoughts, trying to understand why he felt that river was so important. Memories of Laura invaded him with every step, and he imagined what it would be like if she were there, walking beside him. At the same time, he felt Livia's presence as a kind of guide, someone who helped him face his fears. Gabriel felt a tightness in his chest, torn between sadness at the memories and gratitude for having this opportunity to reconnect with the world. Upon reaching the river bank, Gabriel stopped, watching the waters that ran slowly between the rocks. Unlike the river that had taken Laura, this one had a gentle, almost calm current, which reflected the cloudy sky like a mirror. Gabriel sat on a rock near the shore, while Livia discreetly moved away, giving him space to be with himself. He took the notebook out of his pocket and opened it, reading Laura's words again about the need to lose oneself to find oneself again. With a trembling hand, he touched the cold water, feeling an inexplicable connection with that place, as if there he could find a new perspective on his pain and his life. At that moment, Gabriel felt that he was ready to let the currents of his sadness flow, in the same way that the water in the river followed its course. He didn't know if he could completely overcome the pain of loss, but for the first time, he felt that it was possible to find a new path, one that honored Laura's memory without leaving aside his own need to move on. He looked at Livia, who was watching him from afar with an understanding look, and felt that perhaps he was not as alone as he believed. The river was not only a reminder of pain, but also a symbol of renewal. While Gabriel remained sitting by the river, reflecting on all the changes that had been happening in his life since he found Laura's notebook, Livia maintained a respectful distance, but observed his every gesture carefully. She knew that this moment was important for Gabriel and that he needed time to confront his own feelings. However, I also felt an urgency to share something I had been holding on to for a long time. Livia, who always sought to support Gabriel in a subtle way, also had her own secrets, which now seemed to pressure her to come to light. After a few minutes of silence, Livia slowly approached, sitting next to Gabriel on the riverbank. "You know, Gabriel, I also came to this place when I lost someone important," she began, her voice low, almost hesitant. Gabriel, surprised by that unexpected opening, turned his gaze to her, curious and attentive. Livia continued, saying that, years before moving to the big city and starting to work together, she had lost a sister in a car accident, and that, like him, she had been trapped in a cycle of sadness and isolation. Livia described how, after her sister's death, her life had lost its luster, and she had withdrawn from friends and family, trying to deal with the pain alone. It was as if, suddenly, the world had become a colorless place, you know? She said, looking at the calm waters of the river. But one day, when she was convinced by a friend to visit that village, she felt that something inside her had changed. The sound of the river, the gentle breeze between the trees, everything seemed to give him a new breath, a new perspective on life and the possibility of moving forward. "I didn't think I could get over it, but I realized maybe I didn't need to get over it. Just learn to live with the longing." Gabriel listened to Livia's every word with an attention he rarely gave to anything else. He felt an unexpected connection to her story, a mutual understanding of something only those who know the pain of loss could share. He realized that, over the years, he had built a barrier between himself and the world, believing that no one could understand what he felt. But, there, sitting next to Livia, he realized that perhaps he had underestimated people's ability to connect with their pain and offer support. For the first time, Gabriel felt there was a possibility of redemption, of finding something beyond sadness. Livia, in turn, knew it was a risk to open up in this way, but she felt it was necessary. She wanted Gabriel to understand that he wasn't alone, and that his pain didn't have to be a burden carried in silence. Seeing the expression of surprise and reflection on his face, she felt that, perhaps, her words were finding a way to his heart. "I see a strength in you that you may not even realize, Gabriel. And I hope that, in some way, this place can help you as it once helped me," she said, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder in a gesture of comfort and friendship. Gabriel took a deep breath and, with a choked voice, confessed that he didn't know if he was ready to let go of his mourning for Laura, but that he wanted to, at least, find a way to live without feeling that her memory was a chain that held him back. Arrested, he talked about how he had always felt that moving on would be a betrayal of his wife's memory. But when he read her notebook and saw how Laura talked about her desire to find the true essence of life, he began to understand that perhaps he was acting out. Harm her wishes. Maybe, in some way, she wanted me to continue, and I never allowed that to be possible, murmured Gabriel, still looking at the waters. Livia listened to him patiently, respecting every pause he took to breathe between the difficult words to say. He felt a deep empathy for him, understanding the pain of saying goodbye to someone who was a fundamental part of his life. And at that moment, next to Gabriel, she felt that it wasn't just him who was trying to find a new path, but that, somehow, they were both looking for a new way of living their stories. Livia knew there was still a long way to go, but she felt that that moment by the river, sharing their vulnerabilities, was an important step for both of them. After a long silence, Gabriel returned to observing the river and felt a strange peace. It wasn't a permanent cure, nor an end to his sadness, but the feeling that he was, for the first time, allowing himself to feel something other than pain. He felt that Livia's words were like an echo of Laura's, a reminder that living was, in part, an act of courage, especially after losing someone you love. He allowed himself to smile, albeit shyly, and looked at Livia with an expression of gratitude. "Thank you, Livia. I don't think I would have gotten this far if it weren't for you," he said, with a sincerity he hadn't expressed in a long time. At that moment, something changed between Gabriel and Livia. It wasn't a promise of the future or an immediate fresh start, but the feeling that they had both found themselves at the right time in their lives. The river, which previously seemed like just a backdrop for Gabriel's pain, now symbolized a new perspective, a possibility of renewal. And as they left the banks of the river, they both felt that, somehow, something bigger was coming, something they still didn't fully understand, but that they were willing to face together. After the day in the village, Gabriel returned home with a lighter heart, but also with new questions and doubts. The conversation with Livia and the impact of the river had brought a breath of hope, but Gabriel knew that letting go of his grief would be a long and difficult process. On the way back, as he watched the landscape unfold through the car window, he reflected on what it meant to move forward. After all, overcoming the loss of Laura was not a decision that could be made overnight. He still carried with him the memory of the moments with her, as if each memory was engraved in his soul. In the days that followed, Gabriel realized that there was a kind of internal battle raging inside him. On the one hand, there was the desire to honor what he had experienced with Laura, to keep her memory alive in his daily life, even if that meant carrying a constant emotional weight. On the other, there was the need to allow oneself to start over, to make space for new experiences and, perhaps, for new affections. Gabriel began to understand that these two needs did not need to be mutually exclusive, but rather parts of an acceptance process that he was still learning to navigate. Still, the doubt about how to balance these feelings consumed him. Livia was still present, always maintaining a careful posture, like someone offering a hand without pressing. She didn't directly mention the conversation they had by the river, but Gabriel knew she was paying attention to every little sign of change in him. They started meeting more frequently outside of work, to have coffee or to walk through the city's parks. These moments, which would previously have been unthinkable for Gabriel, began to become small havens of peace, where he felt he could be himself, without the need to hide his pain or disguise the loneliness he still felt. Livia's presence brought a new balance to Gabriel's life, but it also brought to the surface fears that he preferred to avoid. On one of these walks, while they were watching the birds that gathered around a small lake, Livia asked, delicately, if he had thought about visiting the village again at some point. Gabriel hesitated before answering, feeling a tightness in his chest. He knew that this place had been a turning point for him, but he was afraid that when he returned, he might be confronted again by Laura's memories. I don't think I'm ready to go back there yet, he confessed, his voice filled with uncertainty. Livia respected his answer, but her look conveyed understanding and support. Gabriel, while trying to deal with these feelings, began to realize that his work, once a mechanical outlet for his pain, now seemed to have a new meaning. He began to dedicate himself to projects with more enthusiasm, seeking not only to complete the tasks, but to find greater meaning in them. When he wasn't working, Gabriel dedicated himself to reading books that talked about grief, overcoming and starting over. He discovered that many people like him went through similar pain processes and that, in a way, finding support in the words of others was a way to feel less alone. Little by little, he began to feel that perhaps he was moving toward a kind of healing. One afternoon, while leafing through Laura's notebook again, he found a note that he hadn't noticed before. It was a small poem, almost carelessly scribbled, in which she spoke about the love that transcends life, about how she believed that those who leave do not want those who remain trapped in painful memories. True love desires freedom, even when we are no longer here to see it, said an excerpt. Gabriel read these words several times, feeling as if each one was a message from Laura to him. He felt that, somehow, she was telling him that it wasn't wrong to want to move on, that he had the right to a new beginning. These words reverberated through Gabriel, bringing him a feeling of peace that he hadn't experienced in a long time. He realized that the guilt he felt for trying to get back on his feet, for allowing Livia's presence to become more important in his life, perhaps wasn't fair to himself, nor to Laura's memory. That night, he dreamed about her again, but, unlike the nightmares that tormented him before, he saw Laura smiling at him, as if she was at peace with the decision he was beginning to make. Gabriel woke up with the feeling that something important had changed inside him, as if Laura's love was giving him permission to continue. Determined to transform this new feeling into something concrete, Gabriel made a promise to himself. He wouldn't erase Laura's memories, but he also wouldn't let them stop him from living new experiences. He realized that he could keep the love he felt for her alive while still exploring the possibility of connecting with other people, especially someone like Livia, who had become such a significant presence in his life. And although he still felt afraid of what the future held, Gabriel began to accept that, perhaps, the courage to continue was the greatest tribute he could pay to Laura's memory. With the promise he had made to himself in mind, Gabriel began to allow himself moments of lightness with Livia, moments that previously seemed impossible to him. Little by little, they began to share more about their lives, not just the sad parts, but also the small joys and dreams they still had. Gabriel discovered that Livia had a passion for painting and that, on weekends, she liked to go to a local gallery to get inspired. He, who had never been a great fan of art, decided to accompany her on one of these visits, curious to know what enchanted her so much in that world of colors and shapes. At the gallery, as they looked together at a series of landscapes painted by a local artist, Livia talked about how the vibrant colors made her feel alive, especially after years of feeling dulled by the pain of loss. Gabriel, touched by her words, realized that this was an experience he also wanted for himself. To rediscover the colors of life, to allow himself to feel something beyond pain. When observing the paintings, he noticed how the landscapes represented there had something in common with the village they had visited, as if nature itself had the power to bring a form of healing. That afternoon became a symbol of a new beginning for both of them, a place where art mixed with the desire to find meaning in life. As they left the gallery, Livia invited Gabriel for a coffee at a place she used to frequent. Sitting at the table, with the sweet aroma of freshly ground grains filling the room, they talked about what they had seen. Livia, smiling, said that she liked to imagine that, if there was a world where their losses hadn't happened, they would be there, talking about trivial things, like two friends who had never experienced such profound trauma. Gabriel, in turn, confessed that, although he still felt Laura's absence intensely, He was beginning to believe that it was possible to find joy in the small moments of the present. These conversations became a foundation for a new form of relationship between them. Gabriel and Livia started to meet more frequently, not only to talk about the past, but also to share the present. They discovered that they had more in common than they imagined, such as their love for old books, walks in parks, and the simplicity of a peaceful afternoon, without rushing to live. Livia began to realize that Gabriel, despite all the pain he carried, was a kind person with a depth of feelings that few could see. And Gabriel, in turn, saw in Livia a strength that inspired him to face his own fears. However, behind these moments of closeness, there was a fear that they both felt, but did not talk about openly. The possibility that what they were building together could go beyond friendship. Gabriel still didn't know if he was ready to love again, and Livia, who respected his time, was also afraid that her own feelings could complicate things. They continued to meet, walking that fine line between friendship and something more, as if they were both waiting for time and life to show them the way forward. In one of these meetings, while walking through the park in the late afternoon, Gabriel noticed how the sun, when it set, created golden reflections on the leaves of the trees. The scene reminded him of an afternoon he had spent with Laura in a similar place, but instead of the pain that always came with such memories, he felt a kind of peace. It was as if, somehow, Laura was present there, approving of the new life he was beginning to build. He looked at Livia, who was observing the same golden leaves, and felt that, for the first time, he was not trying to replace his wife, but rather to find a new way of experiencing love and friendship. From that moment on, Gabriel began to accept that it was not necessary to force answers to the questions that arose about his feelings. He decided to allow time and circumstances to guide the relationship with Livia, without trying to define what they were building. "I just know that it's good to be by your side, Livia," he confessed one day, while they were drinking tea on a rainy afternoon. She smiled, without pressuring him, understanding that this was the biggest advance he could make at that moment. And so, they continued to walk side by side, not knowing exactly what the future held, but willing to discover it together. Gabriel still didn't know if what he felt for Livia was love or just gratitude for showing him a way back to life. But at the same time, he no longer worried about labeling his feelings. He only knew that, beside her, Laura's pain seemed less acute, and that the shadow of the river that had once separated him from his wife was now turning into a new current, one that guided him to a place where he could find, finally, the peace I was looking for so much. As Gabriel and Livia grew closer and closer, the signs of a profound change in Gabriel's life became increasingly evident. At work, he became interested again in projects that he previously found tiring and monotonous. His colleagues, who had previously found his aloofness strange, now noticed that he participated in conversations more frequently and even risked a few smiles, something that had become rare in recent years. Livia, always by his side, noticed these small changes and was happy to see him gradually rediscovering the will to live. One day, during a coffee break, Gabriel received an unexpected invitation from one of his superiors at the company. He was called to lead a project in another city, a job that would require greater involvement and possibly a period of adaptation to the new environment. The proposal took him by surprise, as he hadn't thought about changing his routine for some time. But at the same time, he felt a kind of excitement that he hadn't felt in a long time. It would be the perfect opportunity for a complete fresh start, to leave behind the places that still reminded him so much of Laura. When talking to Livia about the invitation, Gabriel realized that she was worried about the possibility of him moving away. "I think it might be a good chance for you, Gabriel, but I want you to know that I will miss you here," she said, with a smile that hid a hint of sadness. Gabriel noticed the sincerity in her eyes and, for the first time, he felt afraid of losing the presence of someone who had become so important in his life. Still, he knew that the decision needed to be made by himself, and that he shouldn't base his choices solely on his desire to maintain what he already knew. Livia, in turn, understood that that invitation could represent a unique opportunity for Gabriel to rediscover himself. Although she was afraid he would pull away, she knew he needed to find his own way, even if it meant physical distance between them. She offered to help Gabriel weigh the pros and cons of the decision, talking about the benefits of a new environment and the challenges he might face. Gabriel was grateful for the way she handled the situation, realizing that, more than anything else, Livia wanted him to be happy, regardless of where that took him. In the days that followed, Gabriel reflected a lot on the decision he needed to make. He visited Laura's grave, something he hadn't done in weeks, and took her notebook with him, as if seeking a kind of silent approval. In front of the tombstone, he spoke out loud about what had been happening, about his proximity to Livia and about the job invitation. "I feel like I'm betraying your memory, Laura, but I also feel like I need this to continue," he said, letting the tears run down his face. The gentle breeze that blew through the cemetery at that moment brought him a feeling of peace, as if the nature around him was answering his questions. After this visit, Gabriel felt that he had somehow received an answer to his questions. He decided to accept the invitation for the new job, but at the same time he understood that he did not need to cut the ties he had created with Livia. He sought her out to tell her of his decision, and as he did so, he noticed that she was more relieved than sad. "I knew you would make the right choice for you, Gabriel. And who knows, maybe we'll see each other more often than we imagine," she replied, with a smile that conveyed a hope he hadn't expected. Gabriel felt that despite the distance that would come, the connection between them could remain. Before leaving for the new city, Gabriel and Livia spent one last day together in the village that had meant so much to them. They walked to the river again, and Gabriel realized that, this time, the place brought him a feeling of longing, but not pain. He knew that that river, which previously represented separation from Laura, was now also the symbol of a new beginning alongside someone who had helped him rediscover his own essence. Livia, by his side, held his hand as they watched the waters flow, and in that simple gesture, Gabriel felt he had found a new kind of love, one that respected the past, but looked to the future. When the day of his departure arrived, Gabriel felt that he was taking with him not only the memory of Laura, but also the new memories he had built alongside Livia and the lessons he had learned along that journey. He knew he would still face moments of longing and uncertainty, but now he was sure that life, like the river, always moved forward. And, as they said goodbye, Livia gave him a gift. A small painting that she herself had painted, depicting the river that had become so important to them. Gabriel smiled as he accepted the gift, promising that, wherever he was, he would carry that memory as a symbol of his transformation. So, Gabriel embarked for the new city, taking with him not only the weight of his memories, but also the hope of a new beginning. When he looked out the bus window and saw the landscape disappear in the distance, he knew he was ready to face whatever came, with the courage of someone who finally learned to live with his own homesickness. Gabriel's arrival in the new city was marked by a mixture of excitement and nostalgia. The environment was completely different from what he was used to. Wider streets, a colder climate, and an atmosphere of newness that enveloped him from the first moment. He had left behind the memories of Laura and the places that reminded him so much of her, but he was also far from everything he had built with Livia. As soon as he settled into a small apartment near the center, Gabriel felt the weight of silence around him. The boxes that contained his few belongings were still scattered across the floor, and he knew that, more than organizing the space, he needed to organize his feelings for that new beginning. In the early days, Gabriel immersed himself in work as a way to deal with the transition. Leading the new project demanded a lot of his attention, and he saw it as an opportunity to keep busy and avoid the thoughts that insisted on pulling him back to the past. His new colleagues welcomed him, and he was surprised by the welcoming way in which he was integrated into the team. Unlike his reserved attitude in recent years, Gabriel now made a point of participating in team meetings and lunches, as if he were trying to build new connections. Even so, there were times when, upon returning to the apartment, I felt the emptiness that only the absence of a true home could cause. Livia's distance also began to be felt more intensely than he had imagined. They kept in touch through messages and video calls, but Gabriel realized that it wasn't the same as having her presence nearby, in the small meetings and outings that were previously part of his routine. In one of these conversations, Livia encouraged him to explore the city, find places that could bring back new memories and discover activities that he enjoyed. "You need to make this place your new home, Gabriel. And who knows, maybe little by little you will really feel at home, she said, with an encouraging smile that he could feel even on the other side of the screen. Gabriel knew she was right, but the adaptation process was more challenging than he expected. Gabriel began exploring the city on weekends, visiting local cafes, museums, and parks. He discovered a small lake in one of the parks, where he liked to sit to read and reflect. The place, with its calm waters and surrounded by trees, vaguely reminded him of the river he had visited with Livia, but at the same time, it had an essence of its own, which he was learning to appreciate. He used to carry Laura's notebook with him, but now not as a burden but as a silent companion, a way to remember that her story also included moments of love and happiness. Sitting there, among the sound of the leaves and the murmur of the water, Gabriel felt that, little by little, he was allowing himself to create new roots. One day, while sitting by the lake, Gabriel decided to write a letter to Laura. He wasn't sure what he intended with it, but he felt it was a way to close a chapter in his life. In the letter, he wrote about everything he had felt since she left, about the emptiness, the guilt, and the pain he carried for so long. But he also talked about Livia, about what it meant for him to find someone who helped him rediscover the value of life, without that diminishing the love he felt for Laura. I still love you, but I learned that I can love in a way that doesn't hold me back to the past. I hope that wherever you are, you know that I'm trying to live, like you always wanted, he wrote, feeling tears run down his face. Writing the letter brought unexpected relief to Gabriel. He felt like he was somehow giving Laura the goodbye he had never been able to put into words. With the letter in his hands, he decided that he didn't need to keep it in a drawer. Instead, he carefully folded it and threw it into the waters of the lake, watching it float for a moment before being carried away by the gentle current. It was a symbolic gesture, but for Gabriel it meant a starting point, a silent goodbye that allowed him to move forward. He wasn't sure everything would be fine from there, but he knew he was making a genuine effort to find his own path, something he hadn't been able to do before. That same day, Gabriel received a message from Livia, asking how he was doing and saying that she missed the times when they walked together through the old city. Upon reading her words, Gabriel smiled, feeling that life continued to create connections, even from a distance. He replied that he was fine, that he was starting to adapt, and that, despite missing him, he knew that that period of separation was important for both of them. He realized that, whereas before he saw the distance as an obstacle, he now saw it as an opportunity for each of them to grow on their own, before any new decisions about what they would be for the other. The days became lighter, and Gabriel began to realize that there was room in his life for new friendships and new experiences. He still visited the lake regularly, but now with less weight in his heart, as if the place were a refuge and no longer a space for mourning. On Sunday afternoons, he explored new places in the city, discovering little hidden treasures that made him feel that, in fact, there was beauty in starting over. And so, Gabriel began to feel more at peace with the path he had chosen, with the certainty that the love and pain he felt for Laura would always be part of him, but that they no longer needed to define every step of his life. The news arrived unexpectedly, like a phone call in the middle of the night. It was Livia, on the other end of the line, with a voice broken by an emotion that Gabriel couldn't immediately identify. She explained that she needed to make a last-minute trip to the city where Gabriel lived, to resolve some work issues, and asked if he would like to meet her. Gabriel, surprised and nervous, accepted immediately, without knowing exactly what that visit could mean for both of them. The idea of seeing Livia in person, after months of only talking from a distance, brought an anxiety he hadn't felt in a long time. In the days leading up to Livia's arrival, Gabriel prepared himself like someone expecting a special visit. He tidied up the apartment, organized the books that were previously scattered around, and even bought a vase of flowers to decorate the living room. He felt like a teenager waiting for his first date, a feeling that felt strange but also revitalizing. At the same time, he wondered what that visit could represent. Did she expect anything more from them? And what exactly did he expect? Gabriel knew he still had feelings for her, but he also feared that their closeness could complicate the relationship they had built so carefully. When Livia finally arrived, the emotion on both their faces was palpable. They hugged each other warmly, feeling the connection that had always existed, but now seemed stronger. Gabriel took her to see the places he had discovered in the city, including the lake where he used to reflect. During the walk, Livia noticed that there was something different about Gabriel, a lightness that had not previously been part of his expression. "I see you found something here, Gabriel. You seem more at peace," she commented, lightly holding his hand as they walked. Gabriel, touched by the words, smiled and confessed that, in fact, he had found a new meaning for life in that city. As they talked, Livia said that her life had also undergone changes. She had decided to abandon some projects that no longer made sense to her and began to explore new possibilities, including the idea of returning to painting more seriously. "Maybe I was inspired by you, Gabriel, by your courage to start over," she said, with a light smile that reflected the sunlight over the lake. Gabriel felt his heart warm with that confession, but at the same time he knew that there was still a lot to be said between them. That physical proximity alone wasn't enough for them to understand what they really felt. That night, after the tour, Gabriel invited Livia to dinner at his apartment. They cooked together, something simple, but which carried a symbolism of care and affection. During dinner, conversations flowed with a naturalness that previously seemed impossible. They talked about the past, about the things they had left behind, but also about the dreams they were beginning to draw for the future. Gabriel felt that this moment was unique, a kind of reunion not only between them, but also between the parts of himself that he had lost over the years. Livia, in turn, saw in Gabriel someone who, despite his scars, was ready to open new doors. After dinner, sitting on the balcony of the apartment, Gabriel finally gathered the courage to talk about what he felt. He confessed that he still thought a lot about Laura, but that, for the first time, he felt that her memory was no longer a weight that prevented him from living. "I learned that I can carry her memory and, at the same time, create new memories with you, Livia. I know this may be confusing, but it's how I feel," he said, his voice cracking with sincerity. Livia, moved, held his hand and replied that she never expected him to forget Laura, but that she always believed that he had the capacity to love broadly and generously, in a way that respected everything he had already experienced. Livia's words touched Gabriel deeply, who realized that she understood him in a way that few ever could. When he looked into her eyes, he felt that there was a chance for something new, something that didn't replace what he had experienced with Laura, but that could complement his journey in a special way. At that moment, under the starry sky, Gabriel and Livia approached each other in a different way, no longer as two friends who shared pain, but as two people who saw in each other the possibility of a shared future. They knew there were still doubts and challenges, but they also understood that they were willing to face them together. Livia's visit only lasted a few days, but it was enough for both of them to understand that something important had changed. When they said goodbye at the airport, Gabriel promised that he would visit her soon, and Livia gave him a small painting that she had painted during the trip, a landscape of the lake that they had visited together. "So that you remember that there is always something new to discover, even when we are not ready for it," she said, with a smile that mixed sadness and hope. Gabriel held the gift with affection, feeling that, despite the farewell, there was something strong that kept them connected. As he watched Livia leave, Gabriel realized that, for the first time in many years, he didn't feel like he was saying goodbye to something important, but rather that he was building a new path, where the past and the present could coexist. And, upon returning to his apartment, he looked at the small painting on the wall and felt that that new beginning, although full of uncertainty, had the promise of a future where pain and love could, finally, walk side by side. A few weeks after Livia's visit, Gabriel found himself increasingly comfortable in his new life. The changes that once scared him now brought a feeling of renewal, as if each day was a new opportunity to discover something in himself and the world around him. The routine in the new city, which initially seemed strange, began to transform into a real home, with cafes he frequented regularly, co-workers who became friends, and the small lake where he liked to spend afternoons of reflection. Livia's painting, with the landscape of the lake that meant so much to both of them, hanging on the wall of their living room, was a daily reminder that the past and the present could find themselves in harmony. Gabriel also kept his promise to visit Livia. On a sunny weekend, he returned to the city where they spent so much time together, but now with a different outlook, less heavy with memories and more open to the new experiences they shared. Livia welcomed him with open arms, and together they revisited the places they used to frequent. They walked again along the trail that led them to the river, and Gabriel, looking at the calm current, felt that that place no longer caused him the same pain. Instead of being a symbol of loss, the river was now a marker of its own rebirth. As they watched the water, Gabriel held Livia's hand, feeling that he no longer needed to hide his feelings. "Livia, I don't know what the future holds for us, but I know I want to walk alongside you, and I know I'm ready for it. I really am," he said, with an honesty that came from the bottom of his heart. Livia, with teary eyes, replied that she also felt the same way, that their journey so far had been full of challenges, but that each step had brought them closer to something special. They embraced on the riverbank, allowing the moment to seal a new stage in their lives, a new beginning that came without haste, but with the strength of those who have already faced storms. In the months that followed, Gabriel and Livia decided that they didn't need to rush anything. They maintained a long-distance relationship that worked for both of them, allowing each to continue growing in their respective paths. Gabriel dedicated himself to his new job, enthusiastically leading projects that previously left him indifferent. He found new meaning in helping to build something concrete, as if, in a way, he was also rebuilding his own life. Little by little, he began to get involved in volunteer activities in the city, working with young people who needed guidance, something he always wanted to do but never found the motivation. Livia, on the other hand, delved into her art in a deeper way. She began to participate in exhibitions in the city, taking her paintings to galleries and cultural events. Each work she created brought a little of the journey she had lived alongside Gabriel, and she felt that, finally, she had found a space where she could express the full intensity of her feelings. Gabriel visited these exhibitions whenever he could, feeling proud to see how Livia transformed her experiences into something so beautiful and touching. Her art, with its vibrant colors, reminded him that life was made up of many layers, and that each of them could be revealed little by little, without rushing. On one of these visits, after a particularly emotional exhibition, Gabriel and Livia decided to take a new step. Sitting on the edge of the same river that had brought them together, Gabriel asked her if she would like to move to the city where he lived, where they could continue to build their lives together without the barriers of distance. Livia, who had already been thinking about this possibility, accepted with a smile that lit up her face. "I think we're ready for this, Gabriel. And maybe it's time to create something that's just ours," she replied, her voice full of hope. The decision to begin this new phase together was taken naturally, as a continuation of everything they had already experienced. The following months were dedicated to organizing Livia's move and preparing Gabriel's new apartment to receive her. They made plans carefully, adapting to each person's needs and desires, like someone planting a garden, preparing the soil with care. When they finally reached the point of living together, they felt that every detail of that process had strengthened the bond between them even more. Livia brought her paintings with her and Gabriel, his memories, and together they began to fill the empty spaces in the apartment with new stories, laughter, and simple moments, but full of meaning. Life with Livia brought Gabriel a feeling of completeness that he never imagined possible. Laura's memories were still present in his mind, but now they were like a soft echo, a part of his history that he respected and kept alive in a serene way. He knew he would never stop loving her, but he also understood that that love no longer needed to be a burden. Alongside Livia, he learned that love can transform, expand, without losing its essence. And so, Gabriel found a balance, where the past and the future coexist, giving him the freedom to live fully in the present. One morning, while they were having coffee on the apartment's balcony, Gabriel looked at Livia and felt that he had finally found his place. It wasn't just a city or a new job, but a sense of belonging that he carried with him no matter where he was. Livia, noticing Gabriel's thoughtful look, asked him what he was thinking. He smiled and replied that he was thinking about how life, with all its twists and turns, had led them here. "I never thought I would find peace after everything that happened, But you showed me that it was within my reach. All along, he said, gently touching her hand. As time passed, Gabriel and Livia continued building their life together, one day at a time. They didn't worry about defining labels or drawing up definitive plans, preferring to live each moment as it came, with the certainty that they had found a safe place in each other. And so life, which once seemed like a river of relentless currents, became for Gabriel a continuous flow of possibilities, where love and pain mixed to create something new, something he knew Laura would approve of, and that he knew. And Livia were ready to hug together. And as the river continued to flow, as it always had, Gabriel understood that the true beginning was not in forgetting the past, but in learning to walk alongside it, without fear of what the future could bring. He and Livia then moved forward, knowing that what they built together was strong enough to face any storm that came. After all, the greatest strength of all was the ability to find beauty in the new currents that life offered.